All right. It's so good to see all of you today. Welcome and thank you for joining us for the first Aging Academy Navigating Decisions session sponsored by AARP Florida. My name is Michelle Sear and I'm a staff member with AARP. I partner with volunteers and community allies locally to lead AARP's education and outreach efforts here in the Tampa Bay area. I'm thrilled to have this opportunity to reach beyond the Bay to share valuable information and resources with AARP members and friends of all ages all over the country. So if you wouldn't mind, why don't you tell us in the chat, let us know where you're joining us from. We're all curious. So a little bit about this monthly virtual series that we're going to be hosting live on the third Thursday of each month. Recordings will be available on the AARP Florida YouTube page. The Aging Academy sessions, they're designed to help you plan and prepare for your future or the care of those you love. Let's face it, navigating healthcare needs, insurance, finances, housing, transportation, legalities, it can be a daunting and sometimes urgent task. That's why AARP is dedicated to connecting you with practical, useful information and resources to help you identify the what ifs to safely navigate your future. Before we get started, I want to go over just a few housekeeping items. Please remain on mute during the presentation. This is to limit any background noise. We do encourage you to ask questions and share your experiences using the Zoom chat function. Now, if you're not familiar with Zoom, down at the bottom middle of your screen, you'll see the chat icon. We'll do our very best to address as many questions as we have time for nearing the end of the session. Our moderator, Chandra, may share information or links to resources in the chat. But don't worry if you don't catch those. We're going to send an email after today's event with links to relevant resources. Lastly, please help us to create a judgment-free zone. And remember, this is a public forum, so refrain from sharing any sensitive personal information. Now, back to our regularly scheduled program. We are honored to have lead these discussions licensed attorney and professional fiduciary, Darby Jones. Darby's a member of the Florida and Maryland Bar. She is a guardian, trust, and real estate committees within the bar and is a registered professional guardian. Darby served as a trust officer for financial institutions in Maryland for over 15 years before establishing the professional fiduciary services in 2011. As a professional fiduciary, Darby serves in a variety of fiduciary capacities, including as trustee, agent under power of attorney, healthcare surrogate, personal representative, and professional guardian. Darby, what can we expect from these sessions?
Well, thank you, Michelle, for the wonderful introduction. And I am so thrilled to be here and excited about our first episode. And first, I'm Darby Jones, and I am a professional fiduciary. And I have been serving for over 20 plus years in a variety of capacities, as Michelle mentioned, power of attorney, healthcare surrogate, trustee, executor, guardian, and a variety of other tasks and tools that the court has come up with. So I've been helping families and individuals for a very long time with real life and practical, useful solutions. I've seen so many tragic situations, emergencies, family feuds, and rifts that sadly could have been easily avoided had the person known or had some simple information or ideas or information prior to when these events had happened. So when those times come, we want to arm you guys today with some ideas and maybe a fresh perspective for you and your own family. When a family is faced with an urgent situation, it's usually they don't have time to stop and think. Very often, they don't know who to trust, who to turn to, who's in charge, how to hire a caregiver. What do we do next? We're all guilty of not talking to our family and not talking to important members around us about what to do if it happens. And I have a lot of experience helping families and individuals through these issues, and we're going to explore them on these shows. As president of the Professional Fiduciary Council of Florida, I've had the pleasure of working with AARP at Florida together we are going to help address these issues and bring answers to you and your loved ones. And as a result of that idea, we created Aging Academy. So here we are. I am here on behalf of the Professional Fiduciary Council of Florida. That's an organization that's mission is to train, support, and identify individuals in Florida who are able and capable and vetted to be able to serve in these capacities. So whether you're currently acting as a fiduciary, or you need a fiduciary, or you want to know what one is, today's discussion is for you. We're going to demystify that term fiduciary, and we're going to help you understand why it's important to know what it is, what it means, and why everyone needs one. We're going to discuss not only the specific roles fiduciaries play in your life, but how you should go about selecting your fiduciary for your estate plan and what duties and responsibilities they have. I want all of us to feel comfortable chatting, and I want us to feel like we're sitting across from your kitchen table together. And we're going to talk about issues, hear stories, and come up with some answers. I want everybody to be able to go into their aging journey with comfort and stress-free and without fear. The good news is there are lots of solutions and tools to help. And the more good news is that the AARP is here to also help with resources and ideas. And Michelle will be posting many of those in the chat as we go along. So we're going to go through this aging process together because last I heard, aging happens everywhere, every state, every time zone. So we can't avoid it. So let's be prepared and face it head on. Throughout my career as an estate planning attorney, trust officer, professional fiduciary, the most common problem that I ever came across was who to name in their documents as their power of attorney, personal representative, healthcare surrogate, or trustee. They had one. This is especially a problem here in Florida because we, unfortunately, have a very high proportion of what I call orphaned adults. So we come across that issue a lot here in trying to get people named in people's estate planning documents. When trying to put their estate planning together, who are they going to name? What if there is no one? What if their family lives far away? There are no close relatives. Family members can't be trusted, or the family members are too old. The family members have health or financial problems of their own. So sadly, what happens? People very often end up naming a neighbor, caregiver, friend from church, or a distant relative to serve. And when I say serve, what I mean is they're serving as a fiduciary. They're serving as a personal representative or executor in their will. They're serving as their healthcare surrogate. They're serving as an agent under their power of attorney. They're serving as their successor trustee if they have one, possibly serving as their professional guardian. All of these roles are required and required to be named when you're doing your estate plan. This situation may ring familiar to many of you. Wealthy lady begins needing caregiver. Her only child is predeceased her, and there's no other living relatives or close friends. Her estate is intended for her longtime favorite charity and her church. But over time, the caregiver becomes the only person in her life, her companion, her friend, and in her eyes, becomes very much like a daughter. Now, you know how this story ends, and it does not end how the woman had intended for many decades before she needed a caregiver. I've seen this, or a version of this, all too often. This is a very common scenario. How about this? Mom naming CPA's son as her power of attorney and names her nurse as her healthcare surrogate. This sounds so perfect, and they each have the appropriate skills for those roles, right? All is well and good until she started needing some help. The two siblings quickly disagreed on mom's spending. The son felt that spending on hair appointments, nail salons was a waste of money. He didn't want her to have delivered meals or weekly maid service. But the daughter felt, of course, those were necessary to her quality of life, and that's what she was used to. The son was worried about his inheritance? Or was the son just out of touch with what her lifestyle was and what her personal needs may be? How about when the dad names the son trustee over the younger sister's trust? Dad dies unexpectedly. Now the brother is in charge of his sister's money. And he gets tired and frustrated with all the calls, demands for money. He has a busy career, he has family, he has kids of his own, he lives far away, and he never really liked his sister that much anyway. And his wife keeps nagging him because he spends too much time paying attention to his sister and his sister's bills. Or the worn out grandmother who is trustee over her drug addicted grandson and just cannot take the midnight calls and pleas for money anymore. There isn't much in the trust anyway. And she's starting to use her own funds to help the grandson, but she's just too tired and has no strength any left to say no. These are just examples of how we think we have the right person named, but they're either ill-equipped to serve when it comes time, or they're just the wrong fit. Please keep this in mind, these stories in mind, when you're doing your plan. Now, keep in mind also, I am not here as a lawyer, and I'm not here as a medical professional. I'm just here to share my experiences and to give you some highlights of how to avoid any train wrecks in your life. For example, I hear often, what if my kids want to put me in one of those places? Or what if I need help and I don't have anyone? What if my spouse gets dementia and refuses to give up control over the finances or refuses to stop driving? Who's going to take care of my stuff when I die? How do I pick the right facility for mom? Do I really need a trust? How do you find a trustworthy caregiver? What do I do when dad keeps kicking the caregiver out? How do I keep my nosy neighbor from taking money from my mom? How do I stop my mom from entering every sweepstakes there are? None of us really know how to take care of or be responsible for another person's life, medical care, finances, and more if we've never had to do it before. Imagine one day waking up and suddenly you're fully responsible for your parents' lives, bill paying, medical care, physical hygiene, safety, financial security, meals, walking the dog, and much, much more. For many of us, it takes mom and dad's after their death for us to figure out, wow, I made so many mistakes and bad decisions. I could have done such a better job. I should have. If I had to do this all over again, what would I do? So together, today, let's get in front of this. We're all likely to need some help in some way at some point. There's no school or course for serving as a power of attorney or healthcare surrogate. There's no trustee degree. There's no personal representative or executor class. But Aging Academy is here to help you understand what these are, how to serve if asked, how to select the right people in your important documents, and how to prepare your fiduciary to be able to serve. So let's get started. Today, it's very exciting. Again, our first episode. What better place to start with demystifying that mystical creature, the fiduciary. Now, we hope to hear from you in the comments, please, in the chat. Feel free to jump in. In fact, if we can't get to all your comments or questions or topics, hopefully they'll be part of a future episode. And remember, Michelle will be posting resources and links in the chat as well from AARP. And during our episodes, you're not going to hear just from me. We're going to be bringing in experts from other industries, such as caregiving, exploitation, estate planning, common medical concerns, and more. Today, though, I think it's appropriate to start with a conversation about what is a fiduciary. That word is used very freely nowadays. But what does it really mean? A fiduciary can be found in a wide variety of roles. For example, the pilot of a plane is a fiduciary. Members of your homeowners association, or if you're on the board, you're a fiduciary. A bus driver is a fiduciary. Captain of a ship, the school crossing guard. Fiduciary relationships can be found all around you. And it's a relationship which one party places special trust, confidence, and reliance in another. And that other person has a fiduciary duty to act for their benefit. These relationships don't have to be in writing. They can exist merely by implication or the understanding between the parties. The fundamental concept to remember, though, is by law, true fiduciaries are held to the highest standard of duty. The traditional definition of fiduciary duty is derived from Roman law. Fiduciary duty is a legal duty to act on behalf of another party and to pursue that party's best interest. Best interest is a very important statement. A fiduciary is entrusted with duties on behalf of another, and the law requires the highest level of good faith, loyalty, and diligence. For purposes of our discussion today, as we've mentioned, a fiduciary is the person you've named in your estate planning documents to serve as your executor, personal representative, or your agent and your power of attorney, healthcare surrogate, or trustee. Sadly, most of the population do not have their estate planning documents in place. And I suspect that many of you are hesitant to move forward because you don't have anyone to name in these important roles. So let's have a poll. We have an idea. We're going to send a poll out to you right now. And I want everybody who's listening to answer this question. Do you have your estate planning done? So everybody chime in, let me know, and it'll be interesting to see what the answer is today. So the truth is, whoop, I've got to do it too. It's up here. I have to get it off my screen. No matter how many O's we have behind our name, our financial statement, or how many jets and yachts we own, how wealthy we are, we're all going to need help one day with bill paying, going to the bathroom, fixing meals, getting dressed. That's why estate planning is so important to every single person. It doesn't matter how much money you do or don't have. Regardless of how complex your estate is, or may not be, your plan is so much more than just deciding what to do with your stuff when you die. Well, look at here. Here's the results. Well, I am so proud of our audience. 58% of the audience has their estate planning done. Honestly, that's actually impressive. So kudos to everybody out there. Good job. Good job, everybody. Very good. Now, maybe after today's talk, you might want to revise some of those documents, but I'm very happy you got them done. Good. So your estate plan, for many of you, isn't just about what to do with your stuff when you die. And after today, you're going to know that there's a lot more to think about. The truth is, many of us got our plans done probably years ago, and hopefully you read them when they were done. But very often when I get called to act or get involved, those documents could be 10, 20, 30 years old. Often people are so concerned about the attorney's hourly rate that they tend to rush through the consultation. This is a huge mistake, obviously. You need to take your time and ask questions, be prepared, and read the documents. For those of you out there that have it done, when we're done, go pull your documents and have a look at them. In future episodes, we're going to talk about these documents separately, kind of in plain English, and to help you be prepared for your estate planning consultation in the future. In my opinion, and for today's purposes, the most important document is your power of attorney. The reason is that you need to have a plan, a person, in place during the period of time starting today through the day you die. It's this period of time that is the most critical to taking care of you and being able to protect you during your lifetime. You may need assistance or face disability or incapacity or have a medical emergency or have a predator family member or a nosy neighbor or more. So power of attorneys are incredibly important. None of us ever think it's going to happen to us, but it does. By having the appropriate documents in place and the right person named, you can go through life less fearful and be less vulnerable. I have often seen folks name a distant niece, distant cousin, who may never know that they were even named. They live thousands of miles away and have no ability to assist. They themselves have jobs, kids, obligations, and they may become ill or unwilling to serve. As a trust officer, one time I was invited to a holiday party of a brand new client. And when I arrived at the house, it became very obvious that something was wrong. There were no preparations in place. A lady from the local grocery store was there with a huge pile of sandwiches. Apparently, they went there every day to get sandwiches for food. But there were no napkins, no drinks, no dishes. There was nothing done to prepare for a holiday party. Sadly, the neighbors, the friends, the family were unaware of how advanced the dementia had progressed in this couple. And this happens often. People can disguise their dementia, especially during the early stages of being vulnerable. And people are good at putting on acts or giving the appearance that they're okay when they really aren't. They can carry on pleasantries and conversations without even hinting that they really, in fact, this couple were not able to even do laundry anymore. They piled all their dirty clothes in the garage. So please, let's talk about estate planning from this perspective, from the perspective of putting a plan in place and having the right person empowered to be able to come to your protection when that time comes. The basic estate documents are last will and testament, power of attorney, healthcare surrogate, living will, and possibly a trust. So what is a will? Number one, a will is really that document that takes care of your stuff when you die. It's also controlling all the assets that are in your name individually. It also is the document that you take to the courthouse to initiate probate. Now, many people, unfortunately, think probate is something we should avoid. It's a big monster in the closet. For me, probate's my friend. Probate is something I appreciate and use as a tool. You know what? This is the time for our next poll. In fact, here's a good question for our audience. How many of you feel like you understand what probate actually is? There's a lot of confusion about probate. Probate is, the definition is the court supervision of a person's will. And in my world, I like that. I like having the Coast Guard. I like having sheriffs on the highway. I like having the court supervision of a person's will. Now, there are instances where probate may be a difficulty, but for most of the people I have dealt with in my experience, in my lifetime, probate and a simple will is excellent. Number two, what's a power of attorney? Power of attorney is that document that you sign that gives someone the authority to step in your shoes. It's generally financially oriented, so they will be able to write checks on your bank account. They would be able to sell your home, assist with your tax returns. They're very important. Okay, here we go. 60% of the audience today doesn't really understand probate, and it sounds scary. So guess what? We are definitely 4% of you out there don't know what it is. That's also important. So yes, we are going to be addressing probate one day for sure and explain it simply and plainly and in English for all of us to understand. So thank you for that. So power of attorney document is really important and powerful because that gives that person named the authority to step in and help you when it happens. The healthcare surrogate, number three, healthcare surrogate is the document that gives people the authority to talk to the medical professionals. So if you were in the hospital and you're unable to communicate and you want someone to be able to communicate with the doctors or the staff or the rehab or the caregivers, that's what that document is all about. certainly very important. However, in reality, I have to tell you that very often hospitals and medical facilities end up just asking for the power of attorney. I don't know why they don't take that next step and make sure there's a healthcare surrogate, but that's what that document is specifically for. Number 4, what is a living will? I'm sure many of you have heard that word many, many times. That's that document where they're pulling the plug. Okay, you're on death's door and they're going to pull the plug. And that's a document that you're going to sign yourself, giving your fiduciary the authority and the permission to make that decision, so they themselves don't have to make that decision. Number 5, a trust. What's a trust? Well, there are as many types of trusts as there are types of cars. Obviously far more of a subject than we can talk about today, but the general gist of a trust is you're creating an entity, a separate entity, and you're the president of that entity. Okay, so I'm creating the Darby Jones Trust, and Darby Jones is president of that trust. But Darby Jones needs to think, well, what happens when I can't manage my trust anymore? So I'm going to need to name a successor trustee. And it's a contract that I've signed. It says I'm the trustee of this trust. I've named this other person as my successor. And if I die, I want you to do this with all my stuff. So in many ways, it's helpful in estate administration, and it avoids probate. But I have to tell you that most people that have trusts probably really don't need them. And again, that's a big subject and one that we will address in future episodes, I'm sure. One time I had a client that named me as power of attorney, but he named his girlfriend as the healthcare surrogate, and his stripper girlfriend, I'm not kidding, was pretty mad that she wasn't able to be the power of attorney also. Now, unfortunately, he had a very serious car accident and ended up in the intensive care unit, very badly hurt. I was totally handicapped by being able to help him because his girlfriend was so angry that she was not the power of attorney that she ran to the hospital with that healthcare surrogate document and refused to let any doctors or medical staff communicate with me. So here's where it can get kind of complicated. She's in charge of medical decisions. I presumably am in charge of the financial decisions. Well, how am I supposed to know what services? How can I hire a caregiver? How can I do modifications to his home? How can I prepare for his care if the healthcare surrogate is not communicating with me? Again, an experience that you've got to avoid about who you name in these important capacities. We don't give as much thought to that as we should. And hopefully today you'll leave with a little more consideration to that issue. Keep in mind that when attorneys are drafting documents, they have a different lens. They're looking at your documents from perhaps a tax planning standpoint, or an asset protection standpoint, or a creditor protection or avoidance of probate standpoint. And often the clients have misplaced priorities by being too anxious just to get the documents done. They're in a big hurry. They're going on a cruise next week. They don't want to run up the attorney's billable hours. They keep saying, oh, it's just a simple estate. It's just some simple forms. But the truth is, you really need to take your estate planning documents seriously. And the important part of going to an estate planning attorney is that consultation. So take advantage of the time that you're with that attorney and ask questions. After today's Zoom experience, I hope you have a new perspective of the value and impact of the documents in your aging journey. So what qualities does a fiduciary have to have? What information should they have? Let's say you've named your daughter as your healthcare surrogate. Does she know who your doctor is? Does she have your current med list? Does she know your allergies? Does she know all your past surgeries? Does your power of attorney have information about your homeowner's insurance? Any awareness of important documents in your home, or where are the guns, or any important collections, or where are the bank accounts, or what your funeral wishes are? Will your fiduciary get along with other family members? Will your stripper girlfriend cooperate with your power of attorney? Can your fiduciary stand up to potential bullying laws? Can your healthcare surrogate make those difficult medical decisions and be able to turn down some unsolicited medical advice? Think about some of the issues that your fiduciary is likely to face. Your dementia, your gradual decline, possible exploitation that you're unwilling to admit. Perhaps your vulnerability, not just with financial issues, but perhaps social issues as well. What about your power of attorney picking one of those places on your behalf? Have you had that conversation? What about being able to make smart healthcare decisions? What if you don't want to keep having procedures done and you want your healthcare surrogate to have the guts and the power to be able to say no, and much, much more? Is your friend, your niece, your neighbor really prepared to help? Are they? Is your family member going to know what's really in your best interest? I became a trustee of a young lady who is the victim of a birth injury. She received a settlement, not a huge settlement, but it was 6 figures. I was asked to take over as trustee when she turned 18. And the reason was her mother had been the trustee, but they had started fighting and arguing and became so acrimonious that she just couldn't take it anymore. So I agreed to take over as trustee. Of course, the mother had no formal training. Again, there's no trustee school out there. And so her experience was really minimal on how to manage, especially finances. The mother had held the entire settlement for 18 years in CDs. Now, there are a lot of issues about this situation that we can all relate to, but what is a fiduciary be doing at the beneficiary's best interest? The 2 issues that needed to be addressed immediately were the investment allocation. The funds should obviously have been better invested, better managed. But the mother was doing the best she could, and she really had not taken appropriate steps. The other issue that I viewed was to repair the relationship between the mother and the daughter. And by handing off that trust administration to someone else, they were able to reconnect. Remember, a trustee is a fiduciary. Fiduciary has a legal obligation to do what's in the best interest. Being a fiduciary is definitely an art and not a science. It involves determining what's in a person's best interest based on the facts and circumstances at that time. There may be more than one right path, but there are also maybe wrong paths. I often imagine a judge on my shoulder when I'm faced with a decision. Should I sell the house? Should I take away the car? Should I restrict visitation? What would a judge think? Today, we cannot cover all the thousands and thousands of situations that may happen in life, but we're sure going to try to confront a lot of these in this Aging Academy together with you. So today and every day, life is getting more complicated, socially, financially, medically, and more. And people are suffering from more medical, social, mental, financial difficulties at younger and younger ages. So now that you're fired up about getting your estate planning documents in place or updated, you may be thinking about important revisions. Let's talk about how to prepare your fiduciary to succeed and what are their responsibilities and duties. The AARP actually has a very comprehensive lesson book, and Michelle's going to give you in the chat a resource to this. It's a great estate planning questionnaire that you can fill out. That's for your benefit and also the benefit of your family. It's very comprehensive, and it would be very helpful for you to take along to your consultation with your estate planning attorney. However, as a professional fiduciary, I've also created kind of a much modified version to use when I meet clients who have named me in their documents, for whom I don't know them very well, but I might need to get involved in their lives at some point in the future. Could be 5-10 years down the road. So I like to have something in my file just to kind of get me running or hitting the ground when it happens, so that I have a little bit of information to come to that person's aid. Both versions are important. The estate planning report book that AARP has, and today you're going to see on the screen right now, kind of modified version that I use as a fiduciary, because I'm not a family member. I'm not involved in the family intimately, but this is sort of a 30,000 foot up review that I have that helps me if I have to come to the client's help. So let's go through this together really quickly. First of all, you want to date update it. You don't want to have it lingering. You want to make sure this is something that you keep as updated as you can. I say annually, maybe, or every couple of years. You want your name, of course, your full legal name, because sometimes you are naming a third party as your fiduciary, and they may not really know. You maybe go by my mom's name was Sally all her life. Little did I know that her real name was Margaret Lorraine. Who knew? So your legal name, date of birth, of course, so security, whether you're a citizen or not, and where you were born. And these next few items are really born from the need of having vital statistics. Very often I have to be the declarant in someone's death certificate. And in order to complete that death certificate, this information is always asked. Your place of birth, your mother and father's full maiden name. What was your occupation? Any military service, of course, email, phone number, etc. And then you move down into property information. And property can be a lot of things. You've got real estate, vehicles, personal, tangible property, such as collections, guns, etc. So you're going to want to list all the real estate that's involved with your estate, where it is, how it's titled, the insurance, the addresses, of course, the vehicle make, model, and year. Now we're in Florida, so we've got lots of vehicles, golf carts, boats, helicopters, airplanes. So we have a lot of recreational vehicles here, I'm sure probably in your state as well. So don't forget that that information is needed. What the VIN numbers are, whether they're licensed, or how they're titled, any other unique property that you may have. Then you've got financial information. Now, keep in mind, I don't need to know your account numbers or passwords. Your fiduciary doesn't need to know all that. All they really need to know is where to go. What bank do you bank with? Do you have a safe deposit box? Where are your investments? I don't need to know the account numbers. I don't need to know the passwords, but just where to go. Are you with Northern Trust? Are you with Fidelity? Do you have IRAs? Do you have the beneficiaries designated? Are in your required minimum distributions? Are they set up? What other sources do you have income? Social Security, pensions, etc. Then down to insurances. Again, I don't need to actually know the policy number, but just what company do I call? Do you have life insurance? What company? Do you have long-term care insurance? Who is your health insurance and secondary? And then contacts, of course. Who is the attorney that did your estate planning? And here's an important: family. Now, some of us have family, and some of us have family we don't want to have called if there's an emergency. So I want to be clear as to who is the family, and do you want me to call them or not? If there is an emergency, do I call them? And if they're a beneficiary in your estate, what is their contact information? Who's your CPA? What are your funeral arrangements? Who are your friends and neighbors? Again, this is a very important category. You know, if I get a call from your daughter, she's worried about you, you're down in Miami. Hey, I know the neighbor. I can call the neighbor and say, hey, can you walk over and check on Miss Smith? Now, of course, friends. There are also friends that you want me to call or not call. In emergencies, there again, we divide who to call and who not to call within you don't want me calling all your friends if there's an emergency. And then medical. Who's your primary care physician? Do you have any specialists? Do you have any metal in your body? Are there any chronic issues I need to know about? Are there any medications that you've got to have if you're sent to the hospital? And any additional information like pets and who the vet is. What are your aging in place goals? Do you want to stay home? Have you visited a facility that you have in mind? What are your likes and dislikes? For example, if you're admitted to the hospital, do you hate having the television on? I know that sounds really silly, but that's important. And if you went to the hospital, I'm going to make sure that television isn't turned on. What are your goals, long-term goals? What are your fears? And then any other information that might be important, maybe a person that you're afraid of or concerned about. So again, this certainly isn't as comprehensive as the AARP's booklet, but it's important for a fiduciary to have in their file. So if they had to jump to action, this gets them at least started. So in conclusion, I sure hope that you understand the concept of fiduciary duty, what it is, why it's so important, and how they are important to you to have your peaceful, calm aging process. Now, we're looking forward to seeing your comments and feedback and ideas for future episodes. Thank you for your time today. Thank you, AARP of Florida, for recognizing the need for this practical and important information and how it affects all of us. So let's age together, and I look forward to our next episode. In fact, I think it's Mom Fell and Broke Her Hip. Now what?
That's right. Thank you so much, Darby. And so we just have a few minutes left. There were several questions and comments in the chat. Thank you all for staying engaged and really being present and sharing your experiences and thoughts with us as well. That's incredibly helpful. We want this to be a safe space so that we can share lessons learned, best practices. And so one of the questions that Rebecca asked is, how do fiduciary roles and responsibilities vary by state?
Well, that's a good question. I suspect that every state has different statutes that control, especially power of attorney and healthcare surrogate documents. From state to state, those documents are going to vary. Also, trust documents, of course, will vary. One document that doesn't vary very much from state to state is your last will and testament. In fact, most states will recognize a will signed in another state as long as it was signed accurately in the state in which it was signed. So, but healthcare documents, power of attorney documents are pretty state specific. So you would need to make sure if you move from state to state, make sure you update your documents. So in Florida, we have a pretty well-developed statutory regime around duties as a power of attorney. Duty to keep records, duty to do the right thing, of course. But other states may not have as many developed statutes. But yes, they do vary from state to state.
Now, if I don't have a fiduciary and I don't have someone personally that I trust to be my fiduciary and I'm looking for a professional fiduciary, how do I find one? Where do I go? Where do I start?
Well, gosh, that is a really tough question. In fact, here in Florida, we have what's called the Professional Fiduciary Council of Florida. And we have been working very hard to develop a pool of people who are vetted and experienced and trained to serve in these capacities. Again, we have a huge orphaned adult population here. California also has a very well-developed population of professional fiduciaries. They're way ahead of us, in fact. And Arizona also has some regulations around professional fiduciaries where you can identify and find professional fiduciaries. Beyond that, there are very few states that have any organized sort of identifiable place to find one. I would recommend talking to your estate planning attorney or a trust officer. You may not need to have an account at a trust company, but they do interact a lot with fiduciaries, so they may be able to make a recommendation for you.
Awesome. And then Lee had a question as well. So what if I have a fiduciary who doesn't live in my state? Maybe they even live outside of the country. Is that possible?
It is possible. In fact, and we're going to talk about this. That's a good question, because I have clients all over the country. I obviously am not able to go visit, knock on the door of all my clients. I utilize what we call certified care managers. If you go to the website called, and we should put this in the chat if we can, the Aging Life Care Association. They're nationwide, and they're a certification of care managers. So let's say you're living in Florida and your daughter lives in Chicago, and she needs to have somebody here on the ground in Florida to help her kind of help you. That can be done by the utilization of a care manager. They're phenomenal. They do great work. You can put in your zip code. You'll come up with a list of 3 or 4 within the area. They come at that work from different backgrounds. Some come from a social work background, some from a nursing background, some from a mental health background. So you can kind of pick the right fit for what your loved one may need. I use them all the time. I'm a huge fan of Aging Life Care Association. They're a tool that all fiduciaries should be aware of. There's several other great resources, professional move managers, professional money managers, and so forth. And we're going to get into a lot of that in future episodes. Good question.
All right. Rochelle had a question about what about a power of appointment in addition to a power of attorney?
Okay, if I'm understanding that question correctly, a power of appointment is something that you typically would find in a trust or an estate plan. That's not necessarily the same thing as a power of attorney. Power of appointment is more of an estate planning tool as opposed to a fiduciary duty document. Does that make sense?
It does. All right. So I was just going through, make sure I didn't miss too many questions, and my computer's doing weird things over here. Darby, thank you so much for sharing your time and your wisdom with us. I think that we're just about running out of time, but I do also want to thank everyone for joining us today, and we hope that you will join us next time. Now, if you didn't take notes, that's okay. You're going to receive an email shortly. It's going to come from AARP Florida, and it's going to have links to some of the resources that we discussed today, and you will also receive in that email a survey. And so we do encourage you to complete that survey. The surveys give us great feedback about how we can do this even better in the future. It lets National AARP know that this is a subject matter that really resonates with you so that we can create more content, again, that fits your needs where you are today. So we'll be sending a separate email once the recording of today's session is available and posted to the AARP Florida YouTube page. So 2 emails, one that's going to come out a little bit later today with a survey and resource links, and another one once we get this recording posted to the YouTube page. As a reminder, the Aging Academy series will be hosted live on the 3rd Thursday of each month. We hope you'll join us next time. That's going to be Thursday, February 15th, as we discuss the what ifs of an emergency room visit. Now, if mom fell and broke her hip tomorrow, would you be prepared? Would you know what to do? We've included a link in the chat, or I'm going to momentarily, on the Aging Academy Navigating Change calendar. Make sure you pre-register for sessions. The Zoom link for these live sessions changes every single time. So make sure you pre-register ahead of time so that you get a confirmation email with that link. You'll also get a reminder email the morning of that session to remind you that it's coming up, and you'll have the proper Zoom link to connect with us. Now, until then, consider joining us for other fun and informative virtual events by visiting the AARP Virtual Community Center. All right, we hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks so much, Darby.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.